Okay, so that's actually pretty impressive, building the trust and actually gaining that trust. So fast forward to today, and IHM looks completely different from its early days. Let's talk about where the organization stands right now. How would you describe IHM's role today?
When you say role, in what sense? In the work that we're doing?
Yes, in the work that we're doing.
Okay. I think, first of all, let's recognize where we are today. 3-4 months ago, the world was moving in kind of a defined way until there was the famous stop work order from USAID, which then just caused a massive ripple in terms of development work. And so today, when you ask that question, one really just needs to take it with a pinch of salt to say it's not usual times that we find ourselves in. And because of that, you will understand where my answer comes from. So where do we find ourselves as IHM? In a very interesting position where there's a recognition that countries must stand on their own. They must deliver. We can no longer afford to go on kind of carefully tapered process over, say, maybe 5-10 years. We now need to stand up and own. And so IHM really is one of those great examples that shows that when local organizations grow over time and when these kinds of dynamics happen, they persist. So whereas others have folded, I'm really glad and excited to say that we are standing tall and strong, and that we are actually a trusted partner for the government in these initiatives. And so when donors ask a question to say, do you have the capacity as a country to manage some of these investments that we are making? We've seen governments say confidently, yes, with partners like IHM, we're confident that we can move forward and ensure that these innovations, these investments can persist in the foreseeable future. So I see IHM as a trusted partner, local partner. I see IHM as an example, illustrative example of what happens when we invest in local organizations, and therefore government can say we're not going to panic that these global institutions that we've worked with are gone, but actually it pays off when you invest, essentially.
Wow, that's impressive. A trusted organization and a local partner that organizations can work with. So I would ask, what are some of the initiatives IHM is leading now?
Very interesting. Our flagship program, Smart Care Pro, Zambia's electronic health record, has reached a critical milestone of covering 50% of health facilities. That's out of estimated 3,000 health facilities. We are now in 1,600 plus. But I don't think that helps portray where we are in terms of moving these initiatives and the kinds of impact we're making. So with Smart Care Pro at 50%, what you're looking at is the fact that it holds 9 million unique records, which is half the population of Zambia. In March, we recorded 171 million interactions in the system. We always use this statistic to help people appreciate. We say on average a facility has 30 users. So if you multiply 1,500 plus 30, it will give you a sense, which is about, 45,000 healthcare workers at any time that log into the system. So that should give you a sense of the kind of impact that we're making today. That's the one thing. Then the second one is our work with Smart Zambia in the space of digital public infrastructure. How we are leveraging what we're already working with, which is Smart Care, to introduce an aspect of digital public infrastructure called EKYC, Electronic Know Your Client. That will also impact Zambians in a way that was not possible before, because with eKYC, there won't be a need to carry an ID. With biometrics, we'll be able to verify that it is you, a unique person in the system. That's something that's really going to be a game changer. In the private sector, they've been asking for this service. If we can pull it off in the public sector fast enough, that would be trailblazing, because then the private sector can learn from the public sector. So these two initiatives are really interesting, but just one more quickly. I think it's the work that we're also doing around resolving the challenges around connectivity. The private 4G data network that we are setting up for healthcare facilities, that's going to be a massive game changer currently when I look at the initiatives that we are pushing.
I like how you referenced the use of information. You said in over 50% of the
health facilities.
Health facilities, yes. 9 million health records and 45,000 healthcare workers logging into the system. That's quite impressive. So looking back at the use of information, IHM started with a focus on data, but now plays a broader role in the digital space. How has that evolution happened?
You tell yourself, I'm going to do two things. One, wear the entrepreneurial hat, as in let me get something started. On the other hand, you bring on board the philanthropical aspects. We want to make a difference. And so you set off with a clear goal in mind. We want to help governments figure out how they can use their data. Your entrepreneurial school will tell you to say, focus on what you want to do. But then we come to the ground and figure out that there's no infrastructure for collecting data. We've got to build the digital systems and all that. So we've built capabilities that we didn't think we would have. Capabilities around software, around ICT, around training, and of course data use itself. And so when we look at this evolution up to where we are now, where we've actually even spun off a subsidiary to kind of help us hearken to that original vision. So we've spun off TUSO, Business Dynamics, which has taken all the technical aspects in terms of software development, ICT, and said, okay, can we spin this off? You run with this in that direction. And then let's see if we can go back to the original vision and see if we can have that clarity in terms of helping governments use data. So seeing that evolution over the time has really been interesting. And I think the key issue was recognizing that we needed to respond to what was happening out there and demonstrate that we have the capability to respond. That's what allowed us to develop these capabilities. So we didn't develop because we were forced, but because we recognized to say, to get where we wanted to go, we had to put these things in place. So spinning out TUSO is kind of coming full circle, really, when you think about it, to say we were forced, well, circumstances led us down that path. But now that we feel we've kind of figured it out, how do we get back to where we said we would be, which is helping governments use information? Well, can we spin this off that is so valuable, still does great work? For example, the digital public infrastructure stuff that I spoke about, the private 4G. How do we spin it off so that it can continue that work, but then we now become truly focused on the original vision in that regard? Exciting journey it has been.
A truly exciting journey.
Yeah.
So, based on what you said, can you share a recent story or achievement that captures IHM's current impact?
So I think in terms of a recent story would be, as a colleague of mine who went to their family small holding in a town called Kaoma. Not so sure if I can estimate the kilometers, but if I was to guess, I think the kilometers are around 500 kilometers from Lusaka, if I'm not mistaken, between 400 to 500 kilometers. So he went to that place, and so while they were tending to the small holding, it's a farm, a small holding, his grandmother came and said, we have a bereavement in the family, in the village, in the other village, which was an hour's drive, an hour and a half drive because of the road. The state of the road was so bad. If it was bad, it would have been a 20-minute drive, but because the road was so bad, it was an hour and a half. And so they went there to just go and pay their respects. And when they got there, he was telling me to say, as they arrived, something caught his eye, in the corner of his eye, he saw something. And when they had parked, decided to walk, and true enough, it was a health facility. Now, this is in a very remote place. And he said, I wonder, do they have smart care here? And so he walked over, he looked up, he couldn't see anything that would signal anything digital like an antenna. So as he walked over, it's in the village, small health post, no clients at that point, and the nurse was sitting outside under the shade of a tree, and he got there and greeted her and asked, have you ever heard of smart care? She said, yes. Do you have it? Yes. Ooh. He's like, no. Wow. He said, yes, we do. Come, I show you. And they walked into the health post, and true enough, there was a laptop there. And he said, but where are you connecting? She said, come behind. Oh. She took him behind and showed him the antennas that the guys normally set up. And he asked, how many times do they come? Mm-hmm. Once a month they come. Wow. They come and make sure that this thing is working and all that. And he came back and said to me, I never thought, but having seen that, you have won an ambassador who's going to speak about this week. I think for me, when we want to talk about impact, that's what it is. It's easy for me to take you to a hospital in Lusaka and show you 50, 80, 100 computers, show you the private 4G, cellular 4G connectivity we set up. It's very easy. But I think when you go into that place, and by the way, he said to me, he looked around, he couldn't see a power line coming through, but it was working. And then he asked again, she says, well, just come this side, and he saw the panels that the team had set up. He just couldn't believe it, that in such an area, there was power for the system, and there was connectivity for the system. So if we want to talk about the impact that we're making today, I think it's examples like that.
That's an incredible story. I literally have goosebumps listening to that. So what, just to continue with that story, what do you think makes IHM unique in its approach?
That's hard, because I would have had worked in other IHMs, so to say. I've worked in these big international NGOs. I don't think those would be the best comparison. But regardless, when I look at the space we're working in, I think the question for me is, what uniqueness would you be bringing into this space, as opposed to how am I standing out from a supposed crowd? So I think the uniqueness that we're bringing into this space is the strong belief that the problems that we have, the solutions to problems that we have can only be articulated by ourselves as locals, not as IHM per se necessarily, but as locals. I always argue that when it comes to digital stuff that we do, a lot of this technology comes from a mature context. It was designed for that context. We are struggling and grappling with issues that require us to innovate on how that technology can be used. And so I think the uniqueness IHM brings is to be able to tap into those global contexts and then adapt the solution for the challenges that we have. So for example, when you look at private 4G technology, right? In the mature context where it is used, you find that they would deploy it, for example, at a mining site. They would deploy it for companies that have got campuses, like a university, for example, got campuses across town. They would deploy that technology. And as such, when you look at private 4G, it's got limited functionality. We saw the technology, we saw the ways we could adapt it and tinker with the technology such that it would work for the hospitals that we're working with. And so the example that we saw a month ago when we took Smart Zambia to Chongwe was that we were able to deploy the technology for Chongwe and connected 7 hospitals in that regard and created a network that was much more affordable. When we spoke to the owners of the technology, they actually refused that it was impossible to do what we wanted to do. But because we are in this context, we know exactly what needs to be done. We were able then to say to them, change these parameters, bring in this aspect. And when they were doing it, they were actually wondering, what are these guys up to? And when they saw it, they were like, oh my God, we didn't think it was possible. So I think as IHM, that's the kind of uniqueness that we bring, the ability to tap into global contexts, to get that knowledge, to get those technology solutions and adapt them for the context we are in to solve the problems that we have.